What's the most powerful thing you've ever seen or experienced? Maybe you might point to the wild weather we've had this week. That might have been pretty powerful. A bushfire, maybe you've been in close proximity to something like that. A revolution, like a big political change, like the fall of the Berlin Wall or something like that. The end of apartheid. Or maybe something a bit more subtle, but equally impressive, a change in someone's character or personality. We've seen how Jesus' parables and miracles were polarizing. Some led people to admire and follow him wherever he was, and others led people to hate and fear him. By the time we get to the end of the 4th chapter of Mark, Jesus has already done a number of miracles. In chapter 1, his first miracle was to drive a demon out of a man in the synagogue, and it was taken as a sign of his authority that backed up his teaching, which was also strangely authoritative. He heals Peter's mother-in-law, and everyone in the village comes and brings their sick and those who need his help to Peter's house. And after a long night of prayer, he then heals a leper. Healings upon healings and miracles upon miracles. A few days later, we're still only in chapter 2, mind you, he heals a paralyzed man the fame of Jesus' healing is such that his friends have made a hole in the roof to lower him down through the roof. He heals the paralyzed man and scandalizes the local leaders by first forgiving his sins before he heals him. And then in chapter 3, he brings down the fury of the religious elite by healing another man in the synagogue on the Sabbath. This healing starts off the murder plot, the conspiracy to have him killed. Such is the power of Jesus, a threat and a disruption. And there's more to come, as we see in today's section. So the crowds that have loved the miracles and the crowds that are curious about him are so big that he's having to sit in a boat on the lake to teach. And now he wants to go across the lake. So he urges them to take him across the lake. They haven't gone very far when a storm blows up, probably like the winds that have been blowing up over the last week or so that are so furious for a while and then die down really suddenly. But he's in a boat with his disciples, who are, quite a few of them, are fishermen. They should be used to this kind of thing, surely, but they're terrified. They're scared of the storm because they're aware of the power of nature. But Jesus is not afraid. He's at peace, resting on a cushion, asleep. One of the commentators that I read said that where he was sitting was actually where the pilot of the boat should have been sitting. So perhaps that was why they were afraid, because they couldn't actually get to where they needed to move the boat out of danger. So he's asleep peacefully until they wake him up and rebuke him. Hey, can't you see what's going on? Don't you care if we drown? Might seem like a stupid thing to say to Jesus, hey? But before we pass judgment on these disciples, let's just pause and ask, have we ever turned on God in a difficult time and asked him, what are you playing at? Can't you see I'm drowning? Perhaps not in these exact words, but something close. Where are you, God, in my storm, you might have asked. Perhaps you've come close to questioning where God's love is for us at times. It doesn't seem fair sometimes, especially when we know that God is with us. We know that Jesus is in our boat with us. We know from this story that he was transcendent over the storm, and so he is in our lives too, however hard a battering we're taking at the moment. We see Jesus show his power over the natural world by calling the storm to order. We may have learned to do many things. We're very clever, we humans, but we still don't know how to still storms. Even in our sophisticated world of satellites and tracking and amazing technology and very powerful computers in our hands, the power of nature is still formidable. But there is no power greater than Jesus. So he speaks to the storm and it dies away. And their fear of the storm is replaced, quite rightly, with a fear of God. Who is this? They ask. Even the wind and the waves obey him. We see fear again in the next story, the deliverance of Legion, or Mob, as our version had it. This man was known around the place for his disturbed and distressing behavior, his obvious mental anguish, his extraordinary strength, his isolation, his self-destructiveness. We might easily recognize this in our day as symptoms of chronic mental illness, and many will choose or feel comfortable conflating demonic activity with mental illness. That's just what they called it those days. I don't have time to unpack this here, but I think it can be misleading to conflate the two. Demonic oppression is alive and well, and it's a separate thing from mental illness. Whatever this man's anguish, he was compelled to move towards Jesus for help. Interestingly, the disciples may have asked, "Who is this?" But the spirits driving this poor victim knew exactly who he was. As the man falls on his knees, the demons address the one they recognize in verse 7 of chapter 5. They address him as Jesus, the Son of the Most High God. And they ask not to be tortured in Jesus' name. They're fully aware of how powerful he is. And so Jesus directs them elsewhere, into the pigs grazing on the hillside. Very disruptive, to put it mildly. But it's not the pigs rushing down the slope that spooks people. It's seeing the victim now dressed and in his right mind. A complete change in a person's character, demeanor. That makes them afraid. Look with me at verse 17. They plead with Jesus to leave their region. Notice they don't go and find their sick or they're mentally disturbed or they're demon-possessed for Jesus to heal them. They just want him gone. This kind of power is really disruptive. The man himself is the sign of Jesus' power. This changed man is the most frightening thing about this whole scenario. A man who will go back to his community on Jesus' instructions and tell them all the good things that God has done for him. The power of demons is real, but there is no power greater than Jesus. Jesus seems to be crisscrossing the lake in this story. Back he goes across the other side in verse 21, and another man falls at his feet. This time, he's not a social outcast driven by demons, but he's one of the most respected figures in the community. This is Jairus, the synagogue leader. He also recognizes something about Jesus that makes him express due respect and honor by dropping to his knees. He's not worried about what people might think about him. He's willing to lose his dignity in the presence of Jesus. He's there on behalf of his daughter, driven no doubt by his love for her and his fear of her dying. But as this very public request is happening, there's another secret approach in progress. This woman, like the demoniac, has been forced into isolation by her circumstances. A menstruating woman was not meant to circulate in public because she was ritually unclean according to the law of Moses in Leviticus 15. And so she would have been excluded from public worship and most public places for all the years that she had been bleeding. If you came into contact with her, you were unclean, you had to go and wash. If you sat where she'd been sitting, you'd have to go and wash. It was a horribly isolating, shameful condition. But her faith in the power of Jesus compels her to approach. She knows that he can do what no one else can. She spent money and time trying to be healed, but now she knows that this is the one that can do what they couldn't. She reasons it all out internally. If I just touch his cloak, that will be enough. And it is. She knows straight away. She feels it in her body. And her fear surfaces when she realizes that Jesus knows straight away too. He has felt the draw on his power. And so, terrified, she falls at his feet, trembling, and confesses all. That would have been a moment, quite a moment, for the crowd that she's just been pushing through to hear what she's been dealing with. You can almost imagine them all drawing back in horror that this woman has pushed past them. She confesses all, possibly the bravest thing she's done. And in response, Jesus calls her daughter. She is the other daughter in this story. There's Jairus' daughter, the daughter of the important man, Jairus, the synagogue leader. But Jesus has named her daughter. She is the daughter of God. And the blessing that he says over her, go now, go in peace, is actually the priestly blessing. That's the words that the priest would use at the end of a ritual cleansing. So he's basically saying, you're cleansed, you're healed. I give you God's blessing. And in naming her daughter, he has reinstated her in the family, in the community. Sickness can derail and disrupt a life, but there is no power greater than Jesus. But just as hope and restoration arise for this woman, so does bad news. Jairus' daughter has died. His worst fear is realized as he hears the report from home. Why bother the teacher? They say. It's too late. Jesus speaks to Jairus' fear first and encourages him to believe. In the face of the worst possible outcome, Jesus tells Jairus to have faith. That's a tall order. It's one thing to hope while there's still life, but death is as final as it gets, surely. I imagine it was a bitter laugh from the crowd at Jairus' house when Jesus told them that the girl was asleep. They knew dead when they saw it. In this society, they were all much closer to death than probably most of us ever get. They knew dead. But Jesus simply goes and gets her back from death by telling her to get up. And when she does, they are astonished, amazed, as we all would be if we witnessed such a thing. The passage ends with Jesus telling them to give her something to eat. Ghosts may walk around. You might have a mass hallucination, but they don't eat. The power of death and the power of the fear of death are probably the greatest fears of all. But there is no power greater than Jesus. There is no power greater than Jesus. The disciples in the boat saw the power of Jesus over nature. The people saw the power of Jesus over the impure spirits, the demons. The woman in the crowd drew on the power of Jesus for her healing. Jairus and his household saw the power of Jesus over death. There is no power greater than Jesus. Last week, when we looked at the parables, we saw that answers to our questions are found by drawing nearer to Jesus and allowing him to answer them for us. And I hope that today you can see that healing and rescue and help are also found by drawing near to Jesus, the source of the greatest power, the highest authority that exists. The disciples in the boat, the man oppressed by demons, the bleeding woman, and Jairus all approached Jesus with their needs, and so must we. In all of these extreme situations, the need was clear, and the approach was not too dignified. I don't know if you noticed that the demon-oppressed man, the synagogue leader, and the woman all fell at Jesus' feet. Do we fall at Jesus' feet? Let's not fall into the trap of being too proud to express our desperation before our Saviour and to beg him for help when we need it. To cry out to him if he seems to be sleeping through the storms in our lives. To show him we know who he is and who we are, that he is all-powerful and we are not. To come in true reverence and deep awareness of who we are talking to. I hope you're encouraged by these reminders of the power of Jesus, that you're not so used to these stories that you can easily move on. So I want to encourage you to spend time this week on the story that sticks out the most to you from these four. You may be like the disciples, wondering why, when you know theoretically that Jesus is with you, why the weather of your life is so wild at the moment. Stuff coming at you from all over, throwing you off balance. To you, I would say, see what the disciples did and let Jesus show you that his power is greater right there in your storm. You may be in a difficult season of life mentally, spiritually, or emotionally. To you, I would say, turn away from self-destructive ways of coping or self-medicating and seek Jesus. Seek counseling. Find people who can pray with you. Don't be too proud to seek help. And as you bring your issues under the lordship and power of Jesus, the Son of the Most High God, as even the demons knew to call him, see that his power is greater than your difficulties. Or you may be battling with an illness, carrying some secret pain that nothing can heal, nothing can touch. Are you willing to approach Jesus with it, trusting in who he is and the power that he has? He is our source, our help in times of trouble. I'm not advocating that anyone throw their medication away. What I am saying is bring everything to Jesus. Bring your pain to Jesus. Reach out to him and lean on him. Trust him for your healing. His power is greater than your affliction. Or does hope seem to have died? Do we need to hear Jesus say, don't be afraid, just believe, like he said to Jairus? Can we trust Jesus to bring resurrection power to our situation? It may be someone we've been praying for decades, a family member or a friend. It can be so heartbreaking and painful to keep on praying for people to come to know the love of Jesus. It may seem useless to continue. But the one thing our Jesus is famous for is resurrection. Jairus could have listened to his household and not let Jesus go back to his house and gone back and grieved privately and decided it was a wasted journey. But he wouldn't have seen his daughter alive again, let alone be trying to find her a snack. There is no power greater than Jesus. I have no doubt that all of you here in different ways are living testimonies to the power of Jesus. You will all have a story. You will all have something that you will have gone to Jesus for. Otherwise, you wouldn't be sitting here today. I want to invite you to continue to bring your needs to him, your whole self, to your all-powerful Lord, and see him continue to work miracles large and small for his glory. Amen.